Synthwave is such a broad term. I've heard it used to describe incredibly varied music that, to an outside ear, might sound similar. But branding Carpenter Brute, Gunship and Tycho with the same term is akin to categorizing all of Slayer, Nickelback and 21 Pilots as just rock. The terms are incredibly broad and cover a vast and varied spectrum of music. Hard and driving, loud and blaring, soft and subtle, grooving and grinding. There are as many flavours as the imagination can conjure. So where do I find myself in synthwave? An ideal synth experience for me is one that can fill me with relaxation and hope, whilst giving me energy. Similar to how I feel with ambient post-rock, see my Wardlow video in the cards, but with more of a weekend vibe in mind. That's where the Midnight come in. When I discovered them a handful of years ago, I couldn't stop spinning their, at the time, 2 records, Days of Thunder and Endless Summer. Subsequent releases Nocturnal and Kids improved further on their already incredible sound, and earlier this year, they dropped their conceptual sequel to Kids, Monsters. I'm Royston Charmaine, and this is Exploring the Concept. Monsters. So why am I beginning with the middle album of what the band have stated will be a trilogy? Well, quite simply because I think it's a perfect record, or as close to one as we can reasonably expect. If you're yet to find your way into synthwave, or worse, if the word holds negative connotations for you, I feel there is no better place to rectify that than right here. This record is just shy of an hour of funky nostalgia topped with existential ideas. Conceptually, it follows on from their previous record, 2018's Kids, and follows the same protagonist into his teenage years. Speaking about the record, vocalist and songwriter Tyler said, "We wanted Monsters to be about adolescence, where the adult world starts knocking on your door and you have to face questions about intimacy, closeness, and alienation. And so we have a nostalgia-driven concept record speaking of teenage tribulations and burgeoning love. The first track sets the scene pretty solidly." Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention on my last video, what I'll be discussing are my interpretations of these songs and what they mean to me, not necessarily what the artists themselves have stated. Okay, let's go. Monsters. I doubt there's anyone who was alive in the 90s who won't recognise these sounds, and it comes with connotations too. This person is someone keen and nerdy enough to be going on the internet in 1991. That fits the aforementioned teenager motif, and it only builds from there. This dreamlike vibe is what I love about synthwave, and the Midnight in particular. They just know how to craft sounds in order to bring them together in a way that feels warm and natural, despite the cold, artificial nature of synthesizers. A longing for intimacy, stylized through a distinctly robotic tone, indicating the dawning of the internet and online communication, searching for connections from across the globe. A mundane concept to us now, but a revolutionary one back when this album was set. The track conveys a wonder and excitement that such a revelation would probably provide, but tinged with a lingering loneliness.
Take off your armor, friend of mine. I have no heroes, but I got time. All your sorrow keeps you glued to your seat. Can we get you out of your head and into your feet?
We step away from the computer and into a warmer and, as the title suggests, dancier sound. The vocals are, in my mind, directed at the protagonist of the previous song, imploring him to take a step from his comfort zone and find someone to dance with, rather than relying on a technology in its infancy to provide him with potential intimacy.
You could sit on your hands, you could get closer if you dare. And it's not that the rest of us don't have to fight for every bit of love and every bit of light. But tonight is Friday night.
More persuasion, cajoling those with low self-esteem to take the plunge and dance with somebody. The beat is infectious, the words encouraging, the protagonist can do nothing but agree, approaching someone who had earlier caught his eye. Our lives feel long as they're happening, but in hindsight pass by in the blink of an eye. Any potential opportunity for happiness, no matter how fleeting, should be seized, lest we run out of time.
I was a runaway and you were a queen. Our tongues tied in the mezzanine. We were free. No strings on you, no strings on me.
Our protagonist, after plucking up his courage at the dance, now enjoys a dreamlike time with his crush. Tongues tied in the mezzanine could mean a kiss, or it could mean that they were both unable to articulate their feelings. I would imagine it means both, but the overriding feeling is the excitement of young love.
When you're 17, the thought of a spark could start a fire. Tube top and faded jeans, how we forget how we desire. We were
When you're young, it really doesn't take much to fall in love. It can happen when you're not so young as well, believe me, but as I'm sure many of us remember, the feeling of falling in love for the first time is simultaneously exhilarating and petrifying, hence the slightly haunted vibe of the chorus vocal.
we were I was busy dreaming, building us a world, daydreaming up a good life that wouldn't hurt and wouldn't spoil.
Our protagonist projects his future, now filled with the hope of having found love for the first time, away from his computer and lodged in his imagination that is now a positive place.
I could live this life forever, but from far, far away. I thought I heard you calling, you said I could not stay. And I woke up in a fever, my calculations were wrong. The pillars could not hold us, and the angels are gone.
These lyrics could insinuate that he's been dumped, as would be typical for a young romance. Immediately in love, immediately out of love. But I rather think that this is our protagonist's negative mindset creeping in and interrupting his pleasant dream, negging him into thinking that she won't want to be part of his dream world.
Picture of a sunset above a turquoise tide, the beauty of a just world and the convenience of a lie. I tore down that picture, there is no other perfect life, but in the dirt under my fingers, maybe something will survive. When hope
Unfortunately, our hero allows the villains in his mind to kill his perfect daydream, but this could well signal signs of him growing up and deciding not to live in a fantasy, but to work hard to make his relationship and his life turn out the way he wants it to. He's willing to get his hands dirty.
When hope makes you bleed, when life gets you down, there's all the love you need underground to make a way for the dark hearts to feel the love I found. There's all the love you need underground. We dream away.
The protagonist still believes in his love, just not in his former naive sense of it. He appreciates what he has, and he acknowledges that dreams are just that. Instrumental time. I don't think this track's placement is an accident in the scheme and concept of the album. Our protagonist had just agonised over his future and his feelings, so he takes a breather and plays one of his favourite video games. Ecco the Dolphin is a Sega Genesis game released around Christmas '92. If our story takes place in 1991 as the intro suggests, then perhaps this game is a break in the timeline. Or maybe it's here to signify the passage of time. We begin in 1991 with our lonely 17-year-old protagonist begging his primitive internet for connections, and we pass through 92 with him having a girlfriend and only playing games to relax, as this track definitely conveys, rather than for hope in his life.
There's an open road, and now an open door, and a pretty girl's hand beside yours. Do you know what to do? She looks at you.
In a story about young love, of course there's a prom involved. How could there not be? This song doesn't need too much breaking down from me lyrically, it's predictably sweet and earnest.
Hold her hand. We'll never pass this way again. Hold her hand. Forever of a slow dance.
Our protagonist knows that this may be the one and only time he gets the chance to dance with his love at his high school prom. He plucks his courage once again.
There's an open floor as the chorus soars, and a pretty girl's hand beside yours. Who knows what you'll find, but the threshold shines. Can you leap from the ledge, bridge the two halves of the world?
Go on son, do it!
Prom night turns to daylight, rediscovered. Friends become lovers undercover.
Ah yes, and virginities are lost. But how does that feel at 17?
I was just hoping for a smile or a quick slow dance. Fighting fire with flames. If I burn down, would you do the same? You tell me it's wrong, but we both to blame. I wasn't looking for a sign.
The uncertainty and nervousness mixed with passion and anticipation, followed inevitably by the exhilaration.
When I touched you, your skin was hot and eyes were clear. And the room around began to catch fire and disappear. I told my heart that I would keep it safe and locked away. But I found myself walking to you through the flame.
He cannot resist her, even if he wanted to. His sights are so singular, the world around falls away until only she remains. And yet there is a hesitance here. He's attempting to keep his heart safe, wary of letting his feelings stray beyond his control.
Fighting fire, levers, strange desires, sparks and wires. I sign the dotted line and tethered yours to mine. No anesthetic for hearts electric. Parts start to decay when just your shadow half remains. The operation, that complication.
This title track, performed as a duet between the Midnight's Tyler and guest vocalist Jupiter Winter, rings very true for me as a tale of a love that burned so bright but then collapsed as the mental health of its participants faltered. The protagonist blames himself for his love burning out and sees it as a personal failure on his part. He chastises himself for believing that love could be real, something he warned himself of in Dream Away. For the first time on the record, we hear the other side of the story. Our protagonist's partner feels that he is lost to her, that he came into her life but then disappeared from it amidst his own uncertainty and personal issues. It's becoming abundantly clear to me now as I write this, why this record theme resonates with me so much. In the end, she settles the blame on them both, citing his tendency to self-deprecate and her willingness to go along with it for too long. An odd name for a track, a word only commonly associated with a typeface. I believe the title indicates that this instrumental track is signifying a point in the story where our protagonist is writing a letter. It could be that he's writing the album that we're listening to now, however the title of the next track, I think, is a clue to its contents. The variable tempo seen throughout the track speaks of indecision and tentativeness, as if he's unsure of his next move. It ends, however, on a key change to a brighter, higher pitched note. I believe this is the protagonist deciding to follow his city dreams.
There's traffic on the bridge, but the skyline shines with a certain light. And I know you're sick of it, but I know we're happy we're nearby.
Again in this album, an instrumental track heralds a jump forwards in time, and we rejoin our protagonist in his new life in his new city, in love with his new home. I'm torn as to whether this song actually represents a new love, or even his former girlfriend having joined him in Brooklyn, but I don't think so. I think this is a pure love letter to NYC. He's found a place where he feels at peace, and he's content living in that world. Until...
I wasn't looking for action, just some distraction, just a little weeknight, booth in the back. I wasn't looking for romance, just a quick slow dance, and the off chance that an off night and a side glance might lead me to the wrong hands. I wasn't looking for you.
For the first time that we've seen since he was 17 back in his bedroom, the protagonist isn't actively searching for connections, trying to pry them out of either the internet or his high school life. He's happy in the life that he has, and it's in these times and these headspaces where we often fall in love most purely.
I wasn't looking for devotion, just cheap emotion, but I found love like an ocean. On my second whiskey, your eyes tried to miss me, they lost control. I didn't know I had a soul until the moment you kissed me.
Our protagonist is astonished by the depths of feeling that can be found when not seeking it as a bandage to strap across a broken psyche, rather finding it naturally when his mental state was stable by its own means.
Said I never felt my heart like this. She said I never felt my body. I always thought the point of love was just to keep from falling into the deep blue.
Our protagonist realises for the very first time that love can be something that he uses to enrich an already good life rather than to patch over one that he doesn't see as positive. This track is largely instrumental and only contains a few lyrics back in our old AOL voice. For me, in the story, this song represents our protagonist feeling real love rather than adolescent lust for the first time, or at least he believes he is. The lyrical content suggests this, but being back in the vocoder from the early tracks suggests that he may have regressed back into his naivety. This track plays for 2 minutes of peace and happiness, signalling the fulfilling of his 17-year-old's dream. However, the track occasionally warps and plays sound from a radio or TV just out of hearing. Is he really as happy as he's attempting to convince himself that he is?
The top shelf tumbles and the wall clocks run the well. Scotch bottles and the soda guns. You missed the last train from the city tonight. Old friends see each other in a different life.
A somber mood to end the album, referencing alcohol once again, something the record has done with a heretofore unrecognised regularity. The song could represent our protagonist sliding back into his old ways, or it could just be a sad reflection on the city he thought he loved. Or, perhaps, it could be that his new partner is cheating on him.
The alphabet city is dive bars drawn into pilgrims seek a makeshift home.
Two people leave a New York City bar looking for a place to spend the night together.
The subway rumbles under Union Square, and the morning finds an unlikely pair. Hotel lobby holding hands. Don't blink, don't think, don't look in her eyes. Is this forever or is this goodbye?
In my mind, this is our protagonist witnessing his new partner cheating on him, something that you can interpret him as having done to his former flame in Fire in the Sky.
Half in light and half in dark is where we start. Half in light and half in dark is where we are.
He feels that he is often in the wrong and in the right simultaneously, as well as finding happiness and sadness in equal measure no matter where he goes. He recognises that he hasn't come all that far from when he was 17, alone in his bedroom.
Is where we are. We are one beating heart.
This record is brilliant. I hope I've managed to convey that over the course of however long this video ends up being. Telling what is essentially a sad story filled mostly with hope and happiness is an incredible balancing act to have pulled off so well. The feeling of being young and not knowing what you want or how to get it is extremely evident in this album, a feeling I still feel as I hurtle towards 30. Was the story I've made from this record necessarily what is there in the text, or did I project my own personal experiences onto it? Almost certainly a bit of both, but that's how art is meant to be. It is our empathy that allows us to connect with one another and to appreciate the outpouring of emotion that people place in the music that they create. If you heard something different to me, that is just as valid as what I heard, and just as worthy of discussion. And this, for me, is why everybody should give synthwave a chance. It's an incredibly diverse form of musical expression that can be beautiful whilst also being worthy of being blared in a bar or a club. What other kind of music can make you dance and feel happy, whilst also taking you on a journey through the lost loves of a young man finding his way in the world? If you enjoyed this video, there's more of the same on my channel. For all the latest updates, follow me at patreon.com/RoystonCharmaine, where update posts are always free posts. I've been Royston Charmaine, this has been Exploring the Concept, and until next time, peace and love.